A chilling silence descended upon the grand hall, broken only by the clinking of champagne flutes. Every eye was on me as I stepped onto the stage, the spotlight momentarily blinding. I was 22 years old, and in a world where experience was king, I was an anomaly. Just moments before, I'd been introduced as the youngest entrepreneur to secure a major investment in the history of British tech, and the whispers had already begun. My name is Jasper Albert, and this isn't a story about overnight success. It's about calloused hands and a stubborn heart, about proving to the world, and more importantly, to my father, that there's more than one path to greatness. I grew up in the quaint, cobbled streets of Stratford-upon-Avon, a town steeped in history, not innovation. My father, Billy Albert, was a stonemason, a craftsman whose hands bore the marks of decades spent shaping granite and marble. For 35 years, he'd built a reputation for meticulous work, his name synonymous with quality across Warwickshire. To him, real success was tangible, the weight of a chisel, the solid feel of stone, the sweat on your brow at the end of a long day. When I expressed an interest in computers, he'd scoff. Boys playing with their screens, he'd grumble, shaking his head as he wiped mortar from his hands. From the age of 10, every summer holiday was spent by his side, hauling rubble, mixing cement, learning the geometry of an archway. He taught me the value of honest work, but somewhere along the way, he confused hard work with only physical labor. When I secured a scholarship to study computer science at the University of Bristol, his reaction was muted. "College lads think they know it all," he'd muttered, handing me a crumpled 20-pound note. "Don't forget where you came from." My mother, Teresa, was my quiet champion. A librarian, she slipped me £500 from her savings, her eyes twinkling. "Go build your dreams, love," she'd whispered, a silent defiance to my father's pragmatic stoicism. During my second year at Bristol, I stumbled upon an idea, a complex algorithm that could predict fluctuations in the stock market with astonishing accuracy. It was raw, unrefined, but my professor, Dr. Michael Walter, saw its potential. "Jasper," he'd said, his eyes alight, "this could democratize investment." The very next semester, I made the terrifying decision to drop out. When I called home, my mother cried, a mix of fear and pride in her voice. My father, predictably, hung up. For the next 18 months, I lived on instant noodles and worked out of a cramped flat in Bristol with 2 university friends, Rory and Finn. Rory, ever the optimist, would often bring me plates of his mum's shepherd's pie when I forgot to eat, proofreading my convoluted pitches with unwavering belief. "You're brilliant, mate," he'd always say. "Just don't forget us when you're sipping champagne with the bigwigs." Rejection became a familiar companion. Venture capitalists, one after another, dismissed me. "Too green," they'd say. "Lax gravitas." Each rejection email I printed, taping it to the wall above my makeshift desk, not as motivation, but as a stark reminder of those who doubted. My father's barbs grew sharper with each passing month. At Christmas dinner, he introduced me to distant relatives as my son, the computer chap, still finding his feet. He'd subtly change the subject whenever I tried to explain my work, often interjecting to comment on a neighbor's perfectly manicured lawn. He never once asked to see what I was building, never asked to understand. Then, on my 22nd birthday, an email arrived that changed everything. Phoenix Capital, one of London's most formidable investment firms, wanted to license my technology exclusively for £12 million. I read the email a dozen times, standing in my tiny kitchen, my mug of lukewarm tea forgotten. Rory was the first person I called. He let out a whoop that nearly shattered my eardrum. Then my mother. Her tears, this time, were purely of joy. My father, I didn't call. 3 days later, I signed the contracts in a towering skyscraper overlooking the Thames. The executives, sharp-suited and impeccably polished, took me to dinner at a restaurant so exclusive the menu had no prices. Grace Patrick, Phoenix Capital's formidable CEO, raised her glass. "To the future of finance, gentlemen," she declared. Everyone clinked glasses, but all I could hear was my father's dismissive voice. Pathetic boy. You never had a head for success. That night, in my plush hotel room, a text arrived from my cousin, Leo, the only family member who'd ever shown a genuine curiosity in my venture. Just saw the Financial Times. Bloody hell, Jas. You're famous. I opened my laptop. There it was. My face, my fledgling company, my improbable story splashed across the digital pages. 22-year-old dropout secures 8-figure deal with London giant. The article mentioned my age 3 times, as if it were the most astonishing detail. I closed the laptop, a strange calm washing over me. The anger, the hurt, had dissipated, replaced by a crystalline clarity, like the morning fog lifting from the Avon. I knew precisely what I needed to do. The next morning, I walked into a luxury car dealership in jeans and a t-shirt. The salesman, initially dismissive, suddenly became attentive when I casually mentioned the price range I was considering. 2 hours later, I drove out in a sleek, dark blue Aston Martin. It wasn't about the car itself. It was about the unmistakable message it conveyed. I didn't call ahead before driving back to Stratford. I knew my father's annual summer barbecue, a sprawling affair where he showcased his success to clients and family, would be in full swing. I timed my arrival for precisely 2 o'clock, when the backyard would be at its most crowded. As I turned into the driveway, the deep rumble of the engine drew every eye. I parked directly beside my father's immaculately kept Land Rover, the one he'd always been so proud of, and took a deep breath. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about finally being seen. I stepped into the backyard, nothing in my hands but the car keys. The cacophony of conversation died abruptly, as if someone had pressed a pause button. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father, spatula poised mid-flip over the sizzling barbecue, froze. Apologies, I'm a bit late, I said, walking towards him, my voice calm. Traffic from London was dreadful. He recovered quickly, a practiced smile for his clients stretching across his face. Well, look who decided to grace us with his presence. He clapped me on the shoulder, a little too hard. Whose pride and joy did you borrow for this grand entrance, son? A smattering of polite laughter rippled through the guests. Didn't borrow it, I said quietly, a faint smile touching my lips. It's mine. Bought it yesterday. He nodded, winking at Uncle Graham, a man who'd always supported my father's traditional views. Right, and I suppose you're buying a private jet next week, too, eh? More laughter, louder this time. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the vehicle's registration document, handing it to him. His face, usually ruddy from hours in the sun, paled as he read it. He folded it meticulously and handed it back. Must be nice to have rich friends who trust you with their toys, he said, his voice clipped, turning back to the grill. Grab a plate. Your mother's made her famous potato salad. Throughout the afternoon, I tried. I genuinely tried to talk to him, to explain. Each time, he deflected. When I mentioned the investment, he changed the subject to a new paving contract. When I attempted to explain the intricacies of the algorithm, he suddenly needed to refill the ice cooler. When his business partner, Mr. Keith, asked me about the Financial Times article, my father interjected. Don't believe everything you read. Pete, journalists exaggerate everything these days. By evening, most of the guests had departed. I found my father in his small home office, hunched over ledgers, as he always was after a big event. Dad, we need to talk about what's happening with my company. He didn't look up. There's nothing to talk about. You got lucky with some computer thing. Don't think this makes you special. 12 million pounds isn't luck, I said, my voice steady. He finally looked at me, his eyes narrowed to slits. You know what built this family? 40 years of breaking my back, not sitting in a room pressing buttons, not making up numbers on a screen. He pointed to a faded photograph on his wall, him at 20, grimy-faced, standing proudly beside his first beat-up lorry. That's real work. That's real success. What I built is real too. Is it? He leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. Let me tell you something, Jasper. I've seen your type before. Flash in the pan. You'll blow through that money in a year, and those London sharks will spit you out when they're done with you. And then where will you be? I didn't answer. You'll be right back here, he continued, his voice rising, begging for a job, and I'll have to explain to everyone why my son couldn't hack it in the real world. I left his office without another word. In the kitchen, my mother was quietly washing dishes. She turned, drying her hands on a tea towel. He's proud of you, she said softly. He just doesn't know how to show it. I shook my head. No, Mum, he's not proud. He's threatened. The next morning, a text from my cousin Leo landed on my phone. Uncle Billy's telling everyone your deal fell through and you lied about everything. Said you rented that car to show off. Something cold settled in my chest. Not anger this time, just a quiet, steel-hard certainty. I spent the next week in Stratford, staying at a small hotel rather than at my parents' house. I met with lawyers, financial advisors, and the small team I was beginning to assemble for my new venture. In the background, whispers began to reach me about my father, about me, about my company. Rory texted, "Your dad came by the flat looking for you. Asked a bunch of questions about where the money's going." My aunt called. "Billy told everyone at church you're in some kind of legal trouble with those London people. Is everything all right?" Even Grace Patrick from Phoenix Capital reached out. "Just checking in. Someone claiming to be your father called our office asking for details about our agreement. Obviously, we didn't provide any." I drove to my parents' house on a Tuesday afternoon when I knew my father would be at a job site. My mother let me in, nervous energy in her movements as she made us tea. "Mum, what's going on with Dad?" She sat down, her hands wrapped around her mug. "He's worried about you, that's all." Worried enough to tell people I'm a liar? Worried enough to call my business partners? She looked down. "You have to understand, your success, it challenges everything he's built his identity around." "That's not my problem." "No," she agreed quietly, "but he's making it your problem." She hesitated. "There's something else. The business is struggling, has been for years. The new chain companies are undercutting his prices. He can't compete." The revelation hit me harder than I expected. "Why didn't he tell me?" "Pride," she said simply. "The same reason he can't celebrate your success. In his mind, if he admits your way worked, it means his way failed." I left my mother with a promise to try and fix things. But as I drove away, I realized the problem went deeper than I thought. This wasn't just about my father's pride, it was about his fear. Fear that I represented a future that had no place for men like him. That evening, I called Uncle Graham, my father's younger brother and business partner. We met at a quiet pub in town. He remortgaged the house, Graham told me, staring into his pint of ale. 3 years ago. Put everything into the business. New lorries, new equipment, trying to keep up with the big firms. It's not working. "Why are you telling me this?" Graham looked up, his eyes weary. "Because yesterday he asked me if I thought you'd be willing to invest your computer money in the stonemasonry business. He's planning to approach you about it." I sat back, a bitter taste in my mouth. He doesn't believe my success is real, but he wants my money. He believes it's real. He just can't admit it. Graham sighed. "Look, your father is a proud man. He built something from nothing, but the world changed, and he didn't." On my way home, I drove past my father's workshop. The lights were still on. I parked across the street and watched him through the dusty window, hunched over blueprints. For a moment, I saw him clearly not as my father, but as a man running out of options, clinging to a past that was rapidly disappearing. I realized then that his attacks on me weren't just about resenting my success. They were about using me to explain his failure. If my way was wrong, then his way wasn't failing. It was just underappreciated in a world that no longer valued real work. The next morning, I received a text from him. Need to discuss business opportunity. Dinner tomorrow, 7 p.m. I texted back one word, yes. I didn't go to dinner. Instead, I spent the day setting things in motion. First, I called Grace at Phoenix Capital. I need information on stonemasonry companies in the Stratford area, I told her, specifically which ones are acquisition targets and which are expanding. By noon, I had a list of the 3 biggest players in the region. By 3, I had meetings scheduled with 2 of them. Next, I called a commercial real estate agent. I'm looking for properties suitable for a tech incubator, I explained, preferably in Stratford's old industrial district. The following morning, I met with Midlands Masonry Group, the largest stonemasonry company in the Midlands. The owner, Adam Jenkins, was expanding aggressively. We've had our eye on Albert Stonemasonry for a while, he admitted after I explained my interest. Prime service area, loyal customer base, but Billy won't even take my calls. What if I could change that? I asked. By evening, I had an offer in writing. Midlands Masonry would buy my father's company for £1.5 million twice what it was currently worth on paper, with a 5-year employment contract for my father as a regional manager. All his employees would keep their jobs with improved benefits. I also had a lease signed on a 12,000 square foot warehouse space that I was converting into the headquarters for my new company. I was bringing my operation back to Stratford. The final piece came together when I hired Leo, who had just graduated with a business degree, as my chief operating officer. Are you serious? He asked when I made the offer. I've never run anything. Neither had I told him. But you believe in what we're building. That's what matters. 3 days after missing dinner with my father, I still hadn't returned his increasingly irritated messages. Instead, I walked into his office unannounced, carrying a neatly organized folder. He looked up, anger flashing across his face. So, you decided to grace me with your presence after standing me up? I placed the folder on his desk. This is more important than dinner. What is this? Your big investment in my company? His tone was mocking. No, it's an acquisition offer from Midlands Masonry. They want to buy Albert Stonemasonry. The color drained from his face. You went behind my back? I went ahead of you, I corrected. The business is failing. Dad, you and I both know it. This offer keeps your legacy intact. Your employees keep their jobs. You get to stay on as regional manager with profit sharing. So that's your plan? His voice was rising. Sweep in with your London connections and take over the business I built? I shook my head. The business you built is dying. This saves it. He stood up, trembling slightly. Get out. There's one more thing, I said, reaching into my jacket. I placed a single key on his desk. He stared at it. What's this supposed to be? It's the key to my Aston Martin. Consider it a gift. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. I don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's an advance. I headed for the door, then turned back. The offer expires in 48 hours. After that, Midlands Masonry approaches your competitors. Think about your employees. Dad, think about Mom. As I walked out, I heard him pick up the key. The next morning, a text from my mother. He drove the car this morning. Didn't say a word about it, but he drove it. By evening, my father had called Adam Jenkins at Midlands Masonry. 24 hours after that, they had a deal in principle. I watched from a distance, saying nothing, as my father signed away the business he'd built over 40 years. He looked smaller somehow, sitting at that conference table, but when he walked out, the keys to my Aston Martin still in his pocket, his shoulders were straight. 2 months later, I stood on a makeshift stage in my newly renovated headquarters. Around me were 200 people, my employees, local business leaders, journalists, and family members. My father stood in the back, arms crossed, still uncomfortable in spaces like this. Today, We're officially launching Innovate Stratford, I announced. Our mission is to make cutting-edge technology accessible to everyone, not just London firms, and we're proud to be doing it right here in Stratford-upon-Avon. Applause filled the room. I continued. We're also announcing our first local partnership. Innovate Stratford is investing £2 million in Midlands Heritage Holdings, the newly formed parent company of several traditional craft businesses, including the former Albert Stonemasonry. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My father's head snapped up. As part of this investment, we're launching a technology initiative to help traditional service businesses compete in the digital economy. And I'm pleased to announce that Billy Albert will be heading this initiative as Director of Traditional Industries. The room erupted in applause. I looked directly at my father for the first time. His face was unreadable. Billy has built something valuable over 40 years, I continued. Knowledge that can't be coded into an algorithm, experience that can't be learned in a classroom. By combining his expertise with our technology, we're not replacing the old with the new. We're building something better than either could be alone. After the presentation, as people mingled and celebrated, my father finally approached me. You planned this all along, he said. I planned to build something that matters, I replied. The rest just fell into place. He looked around at the buzzing activity, the employees hurrying past with purpose, the sign with my company's name on the wall. Your name's not on the building, he observed. Neither was yours, I said, but everyone knew who built it. For the first time since I was a child, I saw something like respect in his eyes. Not approval, we were beyond that now, but recognition. One builder to another. He held out his hand. I took it. The Aston Martin stays with you, I told him. Consider it a signing bonus. A hint of a smile crossed his face. I already sold it. Bought a new Land Rover instead. He paused. And put the rest in your company's stock. 6 months later, I sat in my office overlooking the River Avon. On my desk was a framed article from the Stratford Business Chronicle. Local tech firm partners with traditional industries, creating 150 new jobs. My father and I weren't close, probably never would be, but we'd found a different kind of relationship. Once a week, we had lunch to discuss the Traditional Industries program. He'd started bringing in other business owners, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, men like him who were being left behind by technology. They don't need handouts, he told me during our last meeting. They need tools that make sense for them. And I listened, really listened, because he was right. The partnership with Midlands Heritage had exceeded everyone's expectations. My father's expertise, combined with our technology platform, had expanded their business across 3 counties. The same employees who once worked for him now had stock options and better health care. My mother had finally quit her teaching job and was traveling, something she'd always wanted to do but never could afford. Your father actually took a cooking class with me in Italy, she told me, laughing during our weekly call. Can you believe it? Rory had joined the company as our marketing director. Leo was thriving as coup. We'd hired 30 graduates from local colleges, creating a pipeline of talent that didn't need to leave Stratford for opportunity. As for me, I'd traded proving myself for building something lasting. The £12 million deal that had once seemed like my entire goal was now just the beginning of a much larger story. That evening, as I left the office, I passed the wall where we displayed our company values. At the bottom was a new addition, suggested by my father during one of our meetings. Remember whose shoulders you stand on. I walked out to the parking lot where my basic black saloon car was parked next to my father's new Land Rover. No luxury cars needed anymore. We both made our points. Driving home along the water, I thought about success, how I'd once defined it as proving my father wrong, and how I now saw it as something we were building together, each in our own way. I'd gotten my revenge, but not how I'd imagined. Not by humiliating him or taking away what he valued, instead by creating a future large enough to include his past. by building something neither of us could have built alone that felt like winning. Not against him, but for both of us.